Hey, good morning. Welcome to my podcast. And I wanted to tell you that to welcome to everyone who has joined us. Thank you so much. It's Monday morning, so it's Monday motivation, and you're about to watch live on Instagram. How is that for kicks? Do you like that? Right. Thank you so much to my Twitter and Periscope audience. You guys are so faithful. I literally can rely on you guys to be here. Thank you so very much. I do appreciate you taking the time to be with us on this Monday. I know it's before the 4th of July and so many people are joining us and people are traveling and going out of the country and so on. So thank you so much for joining us. It's interesting to note that we're having this broadcast on such a day. It's an auspicious day after the President of the United States went into the demilitarized zone for the first time. A sitting president did that. That's completely incomprehensible how that happened. That's one thing. And then the second thing is, after that debate on Thursday night, when I said on Friday that Senator Harris ate Joe Biden for supper, and then to think a few days later, here is Senator Harris defending herself and her ethnicity. It's just something remarkable. Politics in America. And then there was the deleted tweet by Donald Trump Jr., in which he said that Senator Harris is not really Black. So I want to ask the question, what is the politics of race? The politics of race, and how does that impact us? So it's just me this morning. I don't have my experts with me, but I know you are my experts and you are my audience. So this is your story like it is all of us. And I just ask you to join in. Most of my folks on Facebook and so on, they're on vacation. So they're sitting back and chilling as if this does not impact them. But thank you for joining us. This impacts all of us because it speaks to how and where our country is at this time. It talks to us about this is something that we perhaps need to pay more attention to than we have had in the past. Now, here's the thing. Some people often ask me about my ethnicity. So I totally get Senator Harris. I totally get it. People often ask me, where are you from? Well, if you are, then they ask the question, are you Black? Then they ask the question, well, what's your ethnicity? What's the racial composition and the components that go into making you as you are? And that's interesting because it's a lead-in, because then it answers, does that then play into how I am perceived or how I'm received? And which audience am I talking to? I tell you the honest truth, walking into some environments, I am walking as myself. I tell people this all the time. I am me, myself, all day in my skin. My perceptions are derived from how I view the world based on my skin. So I show up. I can't change myself, right? I can't change the color of my skin. I can't change how I look. I can change my hair, but I can't change. There are some things that are irrefutable. And that is the thing that we need to pay attention to. So we really need to ask ourselves, why are we so hung up on how someone appears to be? I can see our hang-ups based on physical appearance in terms of someone's slender, fat, and even then, I still have to ask the question, why are we so hung up on someone's appearance? And why does race matter? Why does the racial composition of who you are factor into your run for the White House? If this is a country that truly says and truly believes that we are one nation under God, then we ought to exemplify that and model that, shouldn't we? We should look like nobody at this stage of the game should have to stand up and defend your ethnicity. It's just like you shouldn't have to stand up and defend your gender, nor should you have to stand up and defend what your sexual orientation is. That's how you feel. You're an individual. That's how you feel. I don't have to stand up and declare my ethnicity. Why should that matter? I am an author. I speak. I write. Why should it matter what my racial composition or my ethnicity is? I don't ask you about yours. I don't ask if you came from Belgium or if you came from France or if you came from Germany or you came from Italy. I don't ask that. So why should you, why is it? Is it that we're naturally curious? Or do we have preconceived notions about people who come from different spaces So when we see someone coming from those spaces where we tend to think that people from those areas do not progress, then we are amazed when someone else progress. An interesting thing happened to me years ago. I was part of, here in Michigan, in Southeast Michigan, I was part of a group of women who were putting together what is called a violence prevention conversation. So to this conversation had been invited a group of people from around the state, especially those who were in Southeast Michigan, especially those who worked in violence, right? So people who are social workers, first responders, the people who respond to violence as it happened. And the training was designed around that conversation. Part of why I was invited to that is because for years I had been advocating for an end to violence against women and girls. So I caught the attention of someone who led a local nonprofit that provides services to women who were violated. So out of this conversation, they formed a committee to create a partnership conference. I don't think they've ever had it since, because they didn't like the fact that that woman, who was a white woman, invited me to be part of the conversation and be part of the organizing. Now, they needed a speaker. And someone said, why are we looking for a speaker when we have one sitting right here? You know what the problem was? I wasn't white. So what they did, what the women said was, the other people who were there, they raised all kinds of objections. Now, the woman who nominated me, I had never even met her before. She said, but what's the problem when we have a speaker right here? The problem was those preconceived notions that people who come from certain settings and certain spaces cannot deliver and are not able to perform on the circumstance that they want to be performed on. We got to be careful with that, because that's the niche. That's exactly what Senator Harris's problem is. They're looking at her like, if we're to choose you and to bring you to the nomination to be president of the United States, we don't think you can do it. Not because she's not eminently qualified, not because she doesn't have the character and personality traits required to be commander-in-chief, but simply because of her color. Just like those group of women in Oakland County, Michigan, who said that they would not have me speak simply because of how I look. That was their perception, right? So just because of that, here I am talking. They needed someone who can speak to violence. I wrote the book on violence. I came eminently qualified. I was advocating in the field publicly. So they knew of me, but they didn't want me because I was not white. Do you see where I'm coming from? These are the barriers that we have to tear down. In other words, what I'm saying is, when you show up for a job, the only qualifier that you need is what? That you are qualified for the job. So if the job advertised is that you need to be an automotive engineer, then your qualifications should be that of an automotive engineer. Now, whether you are Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi, European, American, should have nothing else to do with it. Those should not be factors to be considered for your job. The qualifier ought to be your qualifications. Now, Senator Harris is more than eminently qualified. She was a prosecutor. She was an attorney general for a major state. Now she's a U.S. senator for the same state that she was born in and lived in and did all the groundwork. Her only qualifier should be, is she qualified for the job? It shouldn't have to do with the fact that, is she Jamaican or half Indian? So I just asked the question, what is half Jamaican and what is being Jamaican? Is Jamaican being a race by itself? Is being Indian a certain set of race by itself? Do you see where I'm coming from? Because that's what they ask me all the time. Well, where are you from? When people start asking me questions about where I'm from, I know immediately how the conversation is going to segue into something else. Because what is happening is that now you're going to make a distinction between myself and others. And it never works out in my favor. Because first of all, you have no idea how you're making the person, placing the person on record, and you're making the person feel as if, are you saying that my qualifications don't stand? In other words, when I show up to speak, am I qualified to speak in the field that I've been asked to speak in? It should be the only qualifier, right? So it's interesting because the politics of race in America, because race is politicized. Being white or black in America is never just being white or black in America. It's never just that. There are so many other factors that come into the play. And that's what we have to work against. I tell people all the time, you are not fighting individuals, you're fighting a system. So develop tools that identify your quarry, identify your enemy clearly. The enemy is the system, is not the person. So then if you focus on the system, you're going to win because you'll fight the system as opposed to fighting the person, because the person sitting there is part of the system. They're perpetuating the system requirements. You see what I'm saying? They're not there because they're a nice person. They're there as part of the system. The system works that way. It's just like here in America. There's a system of credits, right? A system of credit, right? Okay. So the system of credit is what? It's designed to create the make it so you can afford to buy a house without having to put your fingernails up and your child up, right? So based on your credit score, it determines what interest you pay and your accessibility to getting a loan. Okay, right. But the system of credit was designed in such a way that for you to flourish, you have to have a job. Now, having a job means you can pay your bills steadily, which increases your credit score, right? Okay, right. So the way the system is designed is that the politics that are involved create such disparities amongst groups, amongst racial groups, that white people tend to have better jobs. White people tend to get hired more frequently than black people. Therefore, white people always have income, and white people get better get better interest rates. So black people are always at the bottom, scraping and trying to make it. And when they make it, it's a big deal because I made it. So that literally they come flying out of the place like I made it, blah, blah, blah. Do you see what I'm saying? The problem is the system. The problem is the system. You have to know your enemy. So if you're going to fight, know your enemy. Now, one thing I will say, Senator Harris has my support unequivocally, not because she's a woman, not because she's a Democrat. I don't care about that. You know why she has my support? I identify with her about the politics of race, because the same things that if it can happen to her, what do you think they do to people like me and my children? Now, she's a United States senator running for office. And if they can deride her, well, what would they do to me and my children? Do you see what I'm saying? And this is what we have to contend with. When Donald Trump was running for president, his qualifier was not whether he was a white male. His qualifier was what? Is he capable of doing the job? That's what everybody held him to, that standard. It was never a disqualifier. The conversation was never surrounded his race or his ethnicity. The conversation was around what? His ability. When Barack Obama was running for president, what was the conversation around? Not around his qualifications, but around his ethnicity. He wasn't black enough. He was born in Hawaii. Hawaii isn't a state. All kinds of foolish conversations. It's the same thing with Senator Harris. So now they're raising questions about whether she's black. Oh yeah, she's black, but she's not black enough. She's not Black American. The woman did not run for politics on the basis of being Black American. She ran on the basis of, I am the candidate who is most qualified for the job. Here is my track record. It so happens that I'm black, and keep the conversation going. Do you see what I'm saying? And what we do as people, this is what I said, we're all like crabs in a barrel, fighting to stay on top of one another. What we're trying to do is to get one up on the other. Do you see where I'm coming from? And that is the wrong conversation to have at this time. It's totally the wrong conversation. The conversation needs to surround all the issues in this election. As Senator Harris said, the soundbite that I got out of it when I saw the clips, because I didn't watch the debate, were that we need to be able to get people to put food on the table and keep food on the table. That is the conversation we need to have. The conversation is not about a food fight, like you do this, I do that. No, the conversation is how are you going to get Americans to keep putting food on their table at a rate at which they can still live. That is the conversation. A few days ago, I was sitting with someone. My daughter was buying a car, and I was sitting with the general manager of the dealership. And this conversation came up. I kid you not, it never not ends. Sometimes I think people are trying to identify, or they're trying to find commonalities or similarities in backgrounds to identify. I don't know. I put it down to that. I know I'm wrong, right? That's me thinking in the big picture context, but that doesn't mean that that's how they think. So the guy sitting across from me fits the demographic of being 60 plus and white male. So without casting aspersions, you already know what demographic that is. So that's whom I was talking to. I kid you not. You all are laughing because you know exactly what was going on. His first attempt to kind of bridge the gap with me was to identify that I'm female and he's male. Didn't work really well for him because I didn't respond to that. My issue was my issue and I wanted it addressed. And I ended up saying to him, because he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Okay." And I said to him, the problem with America is that America is for all of us. I said, everybody here works to ensure a good living and a good lifestyle for everyone. I said, blacks and whites together worked to make this country prosperous for over 400 years. So everyone is entitled to whatever America is giving at this point because they worked for it. So there's no such thing as everything in America is only for one group of people. It's for everyone who participates in the commerce of it. Do you see what I'm saying? And he sat back and I'm like, where, he started telling me that the town he lives in is where he grew up and so on. And listen to me, don't laugh. I was floored with laughter. I wanted to laugh. So, you know me. So I said, you're telling me that you have lived in the same place where you grew up for 60 years. I said, my God, that is the most incredible thing I've ever heard. You know what I was trying to say? That is the most asinine thing I've ever heard, because obviously that tells me how you think. If you have never lived and never traveled and never been to other places and seen how big the world is, seen how other people live, then how can you come back and have a conversation with me about race, racism, colorism, and economics? And he said nothing because there's nothing to say. There's nothing to say. And this is what we're confronted with. All of us need to travel and put ourselves, like I told him, I said, you cannot imagine what it's like to be me. And he said, how? I said, it doesn't come down to just gender, male and female. You cannot imagine what it is like to be in my skin with my hair, my face, and live as I do every day. I said, you cannot begin to imagine. And he said, you know something? I've never looked at it from that point of view before. And I said, good. Shake hands. We're achieving something. Thank you. I got what I wanted. Oh, yes, I did. Right? But do you see what I'm saying? The point I am making is we have to come to the place in America. We got to come there. And if we don't, we're on a sliding scale to nowhere because they have given us time. It's over 400 years. It started when the Civil War started. That's what spurred it on. Did you all see that? Then it segued into Reconstruction and then into Jim Crow. They're giving us time to get it together because there's one thing that's common. We all live here within these borders. We're drinking the water, we're breathing the air, and it's a privilege to be here because this is a blessed place to be. We don't have fights. We don't have to wake up worrying about guerrilla warfare. I mean, people are shooting up their neighborhoods, but that's another question for another time. We're going to talk about black on black crime. I'm going to go there and talk about black on black crime and why people shoot up their own neighborhoods and disparage against their own neighborhoods. It's a very tough conversation that we need to have, and I'm going to have it, right? But at the same time, we have to deal with this elephant in the room. And this elephant is saying that someone who looks like me can't run for public office because I'm not black enough. Is that what you're saying? So you're saying that I can't, according to the classification issued by the government, the government does not give me as an individual the right to say I'm an individual. The government gives me boxes on a form to tick off that they say I must fall into. The problem is many of us don't fall into that box. Have you been to California lately? Anybody? Have you been to Southern California lately? Southern California and New York and Lower New York, right, is telling you the Southern District of New York and the Eastern District of New York, it is telling you what the country is going to look like in a few years. It's a whole megapolis. It's a melting pot. And if we don't get it together, the rest of us are not catching up. People are still hanging on to their tribalism and their tribalistic ways of thinking that is not confluent in this region. I'm surprised at Donald Trump Jr. Do you know why? Because he should know better to talk about stuff like Black Americanism. He should know better than that. He socializes at a whole different level. The people whom they socialize with who are wealthy in this world are Arabs and blacks from Nigeria and from Africa who are rich, and people from Thailand who are rich. So you should know that color is just a matter of skin, a matter of region, and a matter of place. Really has nothing to do with your money nor your politics. He should know better. It tells me that people, even though they can be in social settings, they still do not conform to the teachings of those social settings. They still retain their tribalistic viewpoints and then broadcast it and put it out there as if that's the only way to think. Do you see where I'm coming from? So people get on a plane, they go to the Dominican Republic, they go to India, they go to China, they go to Hong Kong, they go to Italy, they go to Greece, and then they come back and still hang on to their tribalistic ways of thinking. We've got to change. And the change is starting right now. Right this moment, the change. That's why these conversations are erupting all over the country. And I encourage you to start the conversation. The conversation should be around who is the most qualified, whether it's for a political appointment, whether it's for running for office somewhere in your state, in your county, in your city, or whether it is applying for a job. In Europe, that you place your photo on your resume. In America, we don't, because nobody would ever get hired. But we know people's ethnicity based on their names. How many syllables are in their names tell us where people are from. So then we start marginalizing people. If you are Asian, you're good at engineering and math and science, so you do all of that. If you're white American, then we want you to be an investment banker because then you don't have to get your hands dirty. I kid you not. Perception is everything. If you're Asian, chances are you're going to study medicine too. So yeah, you're going to clean up my mess and you're going to cut my body open. Unbelievable. The politics of race. The politics of race. How deeply entrenched are our views on race, religion, and politics. So much so that even 100 years after, almost 200 years after the Civil War, we're still talking about it. Look how long ago Reconstruction was. The founding fathers and the people who laid down their lives for this system to work, I know they're rolling over in their graves like, man, I thought I did all the work. What are you all doing up there? I thought I did all the work for this not to happen. Live and be free. I wish it were me living in today's world. But no, we can't have that. We're still going back to tribalistic ways of thinking that if we hold on to these old tribalistic ways, then we're winning something, right? Hey, Peter, right? Isn't that something? The country where I come from, people look vastly different, right? We're descendants of Europeans, Africans, and Asians. So people are a We're a melting pot of what human beings look like. We're from the family of human faces. So people have different names. I grew up where people who had last names like Lopez and Gomez were common. I never gave it a second thought until I went out of my country and went to other countries and realized how Spanish we sounded. I also didn't realize how British I sounded because I sounded normal to myself until I lived elsewhere. Right? Do you see what I'm saying? So now that I live here, the question always is, what's your ethnicity? Where are you from? That should not matter to the job at hand. What should matter is, am I qualified for the job? Can I perform? Can I do the job? Do you see what I'm saying? You're all so silent. I don't know why you're so silent. Why are you so quiet? Right? I like when you talk back to me. Talk to me. Tell me. But do you see what I'm saying? So now here she is faced in a conundrum that is saying, you may not be qualified. And it almost makes it seem as if they're casting aspersions on her character, that she might have lied somewhere. She shouldn't be in a position to defend her ethnicity. After all, that's how you're born. Isn't that what they try to tell us? The one drop rule. If you're 2% black, you're black. Some of the whitest people I know have 2% black in them. So because they look white, then you assume they're white. Some of the whitest people I know have some serious Middle Eastern heritage. And everybody knows if you're from Southern Europe and the Middle East, you have some African in you, because the Moors came up from Morocco and Cameroon and Northern Africa and penetrated parts of Europe. So there you go. So in other words, what we're saying is, that's why they're doing DNA, because nobody can claim to be purely one thing, because there's some element. Look at folks from Russia, for instance. The people from Eastern Russia, they have a lot of Oriental ancestry. They look like they're Chinese. They look like they're mixed with people from Mongolia. Are they not Russian? They're part of that huge country called Russia. So because they look kind of Chinese, then you're going to say they're not? The politics of race. It's always about one race, one group of people trying to assert that they're superior. Well, what is your basis for saying that you are superior? What makes you a superior human being? Your color? I don't think so. If you came in a different form, yeah, maybe. But as long as you are wearing the same skin that other human beings wear, and you have the same composition in terms of you have blood and cells and bones and eyes and nose, then forgive me, but you are a fool to think otherwise. I have never understood racism. I have never understood how you can say, you can assert that you are superior because you are white. I've never understood that. Please help me to understand that. Because to me, you go to the potty, you pee and you poo, and you put your pants on one foot at a time, and you sit on the darn potty. So for the love of God, help me to understand what makes you superior. Help me, somebody. I'm trying to understand it, because this is a broken system that did not work for hundreds of years, that we tried to separate from and part with, that we're still dragging with us into modern times. It doesn't work. The system of racism is separatist, and it preaches separatism and division among people. It's deconstructive because it creates nothing but violence. A large part of the violence we're seeing in our inner city is based on perception that some people feel like they can never get ahead because of their skin color. It is still being perpetuated, and it needs to stop. It has to stop. If you don't become an active participant in stopping it, well, it's going to stop. Do you see what I'm saying? This is a large contributing factor. So here's what I have to say to Black Americans. You better get off your foolishness and stop acting like everybody who is Black is not Black. Stop acting like, well, you're not American and you're not Black. They all treat everybody as if you're all Black. So get off it. Black Americans are united only when it suits them to be united. But then they start finding distinctions among blacks. Cut it out. We're all black. We're all descendants of Africans. Some of us have more European and some of us have more African. It's just how you look. It's how your gene pool just determines to play it out. You have no control over it. You think you do? Okay, go bleach your skin then. And let's see how long that lasts. And let's see how that happens. A lot of people bleach their skin and you pay for it later because it's not natural. And people have been doing this for centuries. This perception. Where did it come from? Where did this perception come from? We got to change that. Because that's what created colonialism. And do you know what's happening all over Europe today? Do you know why the Great Migration is happening in Europe? The people who are left behind in Africa were truly the ones left behind by the colonial powers of Europe, who took everything out of their country and left them with nothing. And then they have nothing and cannot exist in their lands. So they're going to Europe, to where the fathers of the Europeans took all the wealth that built up Europe. Hello, that's all that it is. The politics of race. Interesting, isn't it? Mucho interesante. In the words of my Spanish teacher. Mucho interesante. It is very interesting because after hundreds of years, we're still confronted with the same dilemma. We still look at people and we don't hear their voice speaking truth. We look at their faces and determine if the face is the only qualifier that they're speaking truth. There's a young woman in Congress right now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's obviously Hispanic, right? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But the fight that she's been given, her voice is powerful because she's leading a change movement based on the fact that we must change the political system that has not helped the disenfranchised. They get your votes, but they haven't done anything to change the status quo of people. Fundamental change. So her voice has risen up as one of the prominent political voices of our contemporary times. She created a whole niche for herself. She's walking in a whole lane. And naturally, when you stand out, you're being given what? The fight of your life. So they're disparaging against her beginnings. No, she's lying. She must have come from money because you only had. It's disparaging against who she is. Why should that matter? Shouldn't her qualifier be, is she qualified for the job? Instead of her ethnicity and other factors that have nothing to do with her getting the job done. The only thing that is going to help her get the job done is her own drive and ambition. The politics of race. The politics of race. It's deep. I know you're all nodding your head. It's deep. It's some deep stuff. Because the more you look at it and start unraveling it and looking through human history, is the more you realize how much politics and race influenced what happened during colonialism that has created the world as we know it today. The existence of world economic systems are based primarily on color. So people of color are always the majority of poor because richer people who tend to be white, who were just more aggressive, I think, just went and got it and took it back to their countries to build up their countries and then left the colored people behind. And the colored people for centuries are still wandering in the dark, like, where's my compass, fighting against one another. I have never understood that. Why are you fighting against one another? That's not your enemy. My enemy is not you. My enemy is the system. The system is what needs to change. All of us collectively need to look at the system and just be frank with ourselves. Is it working for all? No, it isn't. It isn't working for all if I have to live in a gated community so that people who are disenfranchised don't come and attack me. It isn't working if I have to drive around armed to the teeth because I drive a better car, I live in a better neighborhood. That means people are going to come at me. It isn't working if I can't send my kids to public school because the people who don't have as much as I do will kidnap my. It isn't working. If we have all these factors to consider, then we really need to re-examine it and go back again and say there was a message and a lesson that we did not learn, that we now have to inculcate into our everyday lives and change the discourse moving forward. We've got to change the ways that we have been doing things because it has not worked. This is 2019. Someone running for president should only be a contender based on their track record. That's all. That should be the only, and that is true for the vast majority of male candidates who are white male. The one black guy in there, I think, is Cory Booker, and nobody's going to ask him what he is because they take him at his word, but he's a male. So the only consideration for running for president or any political office ought to be your track record. Are you able to do the job that you're applying for? And if you are, well, let's get to it. And let's end this conversation. Fix the matter. We need to fix it, America. We need to fix it. We can't be running against people. I have no qualms about people running because you're qualified to do the job. We feel like you can do it. Whoever you are, wherever you are, can you do it? People elected Donald Trump because they felt like he could do the job. That was his qualifier. They said, well, he's a billionaire, he's run businesses, and he's successful, so he must be able to run a country. So they elected him. So the qualifier, so in other words, we can't have a double standard. One standard for males and a different standard for females. So we're going to try to dissect you to find out where you come from. But we didn't do that for the group of people who were males. Kind of not cool. Nah. Right? I know it's a lot to think about, but the politics of race, we got to fix this. We got to fix this. We got to be more engaging because there are other people, young people, who have a contribution to make and who are looking at this and they're like, I don't know that I want to put myself out there because that's what they're going to do to me. And I don't need that. There are plenty of young people who are looking at this and saying, and this is why the political field is crowded with people over 75. Because younger people are like, I don't have time for that. I don't want to be ripped apart and torn apart. And every decision I have made over my lifetime is questioned. When I was young, I did young things, foolish things that young people do. Young people do foolish young things. But then I got older and I got wise. Why can't I live in a society where the decisions that I thought of and made 30 years ago, when viewed from the perspective of hindsight, were not the best things I could have done? Why am I not giving that due consideration? Do you see what I'm saying? The politics of race. Interesting, isn't it? So I want you to think about this as we move forward and judge folks, not on the color of their skin, but on who they are. Are they able to do the job? Are they good people just because they're good people? Not because their skin color looks different from yours or mine, but they're good people because they're good people. That's how we need to look at it. We're human. People come from the family of human faces. We immediately look at one another and distrust based on preconceived notions. We need to stop that. And for the love of God, tomorrow I'll address Black people and talk about how young Black folks continue to perpetuate the myth and how changing the diatribe and the conversation around that is entirely dependent upon how they perceive themselves and put themselves forward. Change it. Because here's the thing, we're trying to change it, but there are still a group of people alive who haven't seen the light yet. They're in their 50s, the upper 50s to 60s. It's going to take them some time. They're going to have to live amongst us for a while and get used to people. You notice the kids nowadays don't care about stuff like that. They come home and bring home 5 different friends from 5 different ethnic categories. And you just roll with the punches. And you're like, okay, this is my friend Maya. This is my friend Samaya. And you're like, okay. The politics of race. The politics of race. The politics of race. Somebody saying hi. Right? Right? So the politics of race. So how are we going to change the conversation? Well, it starts with you and I by having a conversation about what matters. Like, can I ask you something? When you're dating someone, when you start going out with someone, do you kind of ask them who they are? Do you find out their ethnicity? Does that matter? Do you think that that's important to them being a good partner? Or do you go on the basis that you're attracted to them? Is that how you do that? No, I'm curious. I'm just curious. When people start dating, do you date someone? Do you say, okay, I only date a certain group of people? So if they're not from that ethnic group, do you just date them? I'm just asking. I'm asking. Because that says a lot about how we think. And why is that so? Why is that so? Well, the truth of the matter is that certain groups of people do come with, based on culture and ethnicity and environment, certain groups of people do come with certain predisposed, predetermined factors. That is true. But what about people who have, what about people who are just people? Can we just judge someone based on who they are? Do we have to? Have you ever listened to how you describe people? I know that I'm just as guilty as anyone else. Have you ever listened to how we describe people? Well, that tall, dark guy. Well, the tall white guy with blue eyes who wears glasses. Or the Hispanic girl who is in my literature class. Or the guy who sits next to me in the cubicle is from Bangladesh. The Chaldean guy who owns a party store. That's how we describe people. We don't say the guy who owns a party store. Why is race? See how we've been socialized? We've been socialized to think that race is more important than who you are. And that's what we need to change. We need to change that, right? That's got to go. We've been socialized to think that people from a certain category, a certain racial group, come with a certain set of skills and a certain set of factors. And that's what we need to change. We need to change that. Like quick, fast, and in a hurry. That has got to change. Right? Can't fit in today. Can't fit in. Can't fit in. We got to change that. We got to change that. That has to change. And so, what are we going to do? Mr. Gavinson, you're still there. Right? What are we going to do? We've got to change. We have to start thinking in terms of who the person is. We have to start placing more emphasis and more importance on who you are as a person, as opposed to what you do for a living. We even judge people. After we group people by ethnicity and color and race, the next thing we do group people by is, what do you do? What if someone were a janitor? Does that mean they're less of a human being? I kid you not. What if someone were the person who picks up a garbage collector? Does that mean they're less of a human being? Do you see how ridiculous we sound? Because I have a funny feeling, right? I've never been to heaven, but I have a funny feeling that when we get to heaven, we're going to be seated with people, just people. And for those of us who spent our lifetimes thinking we were royalty, not that anything is wrong with you asserting and ascribing certain characteristics to yourself, but for those of us who thought we were superior beings to others, I have a funny feeling that when you get to heaven, that's not the case. That's not how people are divided. I have a funny feeling that it's a level playing field. That's why nobody has come back, because then everybody would fall in line. You kind of have to walk it out and walk by faith. In other words, when you look at ourselves, you got to look at ourselves from the heaven perspective. And from the God perspective, we're all just human beings. We come with certain organs without which we can't breathe or live. And the only set of skills that we are given are the ones we were born with. And we're given a certain group of organs to work, to make the body work. If they don't work, that's why we have medicine. Medicine is designed to fix what is broken. But don't go there. Don't ask me what to fix this broken racist system. It's application. Yeah, we're going to have to make the commitment to doing it, and we're going to have to apply it and be judicious about it so that we can win, right? Interesting stuff. Kamala Harris really should not be defensive of her position as a person of color. The only qualifier that should be considered about her is her qualification and track record, not about whether she's black. I don't know if there's a specific racial group. Maybe we're doing race different when we try to group people black, white, red, yellow, green. Maybe we should group people by where they come from, because apparently that's what Donald Trump Jr. is trying to say. He's saying that she's half Indian and half Jamaican. So that must be, those two groups of people must be a whole different race by themselves. Right? Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Amazing how people see others, right? Amazing. So thank you so much for joining me this morning. Go to my website, harrietkemmock.com. I left you with a lot to think about. All I want you to think about is judging the person based on who they are. What do they do? As Martin Luther King said, judge folks by the content of their character, not by their appearance, not by how they look, not by what they do for a living, but who they are. Who do they present themselves to be? Judge them based on that. Seems to work for other people. It should be right across the board, right? So go to my website, harrietkemmock.com, or the exodusfoundation.com. Find out more information about us, buy my books. They're available on amazon.com and barnesandnoble.com. Join us again. We won't have a broadcast this Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It's the holidays. Take some time off, right? When we come back next week, we're going to go straight through the week, and we're going to do a broadcast on Sunday morning. So I know you will join me. I'll set that up and let you know, right? So see you tomorrow, right? Right. Great. Thanks so much, everybody. Be blessed. Thanks. See you. Have a great day. All righty. We're good to go.